Well, hi everyone. Welcome to our panel on inspiring private sector action here at the NCSC Drawdown 2021 conference. The name of this conference says it all: research to action, science and solutions for a planet under pressure. And that's what this panel is all about. We already know the solutions, and the science could not be more clear. But how do we scale climate solutions in the world at the level this challenge demands? Well, one big lever is the private sector. So I'm thrilled to be here today with leaders from across companies of different sectors to discuss what corporate climate leadership looks like today, and is it sufficient to the scale of the problem? We'll also hear from a young climate activist to reflect on what future generations might say to us today. So here we are with Ana Escuer, lead for climate and water on Google's sustainability team. Scott Tu, Vice President of Sustainability and Managing Director of the Center for Energy Efficiency and Sustainability at Trane Technologies. Sean Kinghorn, Global Sustainability Leader at Intuit. And Elouise Mayall, an ecology master's student at the University of East Anglica and a climate activist with the UK Youth Climate Coalition. Thank you all for joining us. I'm excited to turn the floor over to you all now. Just wanted to start by getting a sense from all of you of your companies, starting with Scott, Anna, and Sean, of your company's existing climate commitments and where you are today in terms of achieving them. We'll start with Anna.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to be part of this panel. So sustainability has been a core value for Google since our funding in 1998, 2 decades ago. In 2007, we were the first major company to become carbon neutral. So almost 14 years ago, we set our carbon strategy based on a mitigation hierarchy that we still follow today. First, efficiency. The cleanest energy is the energy that you don't consume. Second, renewable energy, with a goal to reach 100% renewable energy. And third, high quality carbon offsets for any emissions that you can yet mitigate. In 2010, 3 years later, we signed our first PPA, power purchase agreement, to secure renewable energy. And only 7 years later, in 2017, we achieved our 100% renewable energy goal. So we have now been matching 100% of our global consumption with renewable energy for 3 years in a row. And we are amongst the largest corporate buyers of renewable energy in the world. However, we know that we could and we should do more to fight climate change. So this last September, our CEO, Sundar Pichai, launched our 3rd decade of climate action, our most ambitious yet. Our 2030 carbon strategy aims to evolve our operational commitments to the next level, particularly on energy, which is a key piece of the drawdown framework. By 2030, we aim to run all of our operations on 24/7 carbon-free energy. No other major company has committed to such endeavor, and we aim to be there first. What this really means is that we'll have to continue innovating to find solutions to source carbon-free energy when the sun doesn't shine and when the wind doesn't blow, so we can stop effectively relying on carbon-intensive energy sources. And with us, we also hope to bring many others along. But what excites me the most, and what I think is, for me, the biggest piece of our 2030 carbon strategy, is that we have now made a very explicit commitment to enable everyone to reach a carbon-free future: our partners, our customers, and most importantly, our users. We have also committed to enable 1 billion users to take new sustainable actions by 2022 through our core products. So although we have already made a lot of progress in our climate action during our first 2 decades, we are really, really excited to continue innovating, pushing boundaries during our next decade of climate action.
Thank you, Anna. That's really, really very exciting work. And we'll look forward to hearing a little bit more about that in our next question. But I'll turn it over now to Scott. I'd love to hear a little bit more about Trane Technologies' existing climate commitments.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. And it's great to be here with all the rest of the panelists. I get energized when I hear what other companies are doing because it makes us feel like we're on the right track for sure. Trane Technologies has been working on our most material issue, which is greenhouse gas footprint reductions for many years. We've been focused on it for the past decade, but in particular, last year was a big year for us. We completed our first science-based target, and it was a big focus on reducing the company's greenhouse gas footprint. We had committed to, through last year, we had committed to reducing our product-related refrigerant footprint by 50%, and we committed to reducing the refrigerant footprint, or GHG footprint, of our operations by 35%. And I'm delighted to say that we finished both of those and we exceeded them greatly. We actually hit an 80% mark on the product side, and we reduced our operational footprint by more than 50%, 51%. And that was the foundation for our latest and greatest climate commitments. We have recently announced our 2030 commitments of a reduction of 1 gigaton of carbon from our customers' footprints, which is a scope 3 related reduction. And for scopes 1 and 2, we have decided to move and commit to carbon neutral. But our recent science-based target, making us one of the very few companies that actually has completed a science-based target and now has a second science-based target, it puts us on the path to net zero emissions. And so the journey has begun, and I'm proud that many other companies are committing to those things. I'd love to see more and more sign up for those science-based targets to make sure, to your point, Jamie, that we are aligned with pathways that truly make a difference. And that's certainly the one that we're on, and we're looking forward to continuing to pull our industry peers with us, to influence them in terms of pathways that they can take, whether it's product related, operations related, customer related, in terms of life cycle related issues. And so we're really excited about where we've been. We're also excited where we're going.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. And you really, I mean, your work really exemplifies, how we're achieving some of the climate solutions that Drawdown has analyzed around refrigerants is, one of the top most impactful solutions. So
that's right.
Thank you for your work there. And Sean, I would love to hear from you. Sean was one of the an old friend of Project Drawdowns, and one of the inspirations for why Project Drawdown is now engaged in work with the private sector. So I'd love to hear more from you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks for letting me join the panel. So at Intuit, we really launched our first targets in 2014 around greenhouse gas emissions. We've done a great job over time. We surpassed those first carbon reduction. It was set for 2020. We surpassed them in 2016. And so we set new goals. One was 100% renewable electricity by 2030. The second goal was reducing our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 80% by 2025. And then the third goal was reducing our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by 50% by 2025. And so we actually hit all three of those this past September. And so proud that we've done that. The year prior, the summer prior, 2019, we had signed on to a virtual power purchase agreement with some other companies. So we knew we were going to be hitting these targets early. And you celebrate for 2 seconds, and then you look at the global scale of climate change and think, we're doing a good job, but the whole planet has to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030. So, we had set a science-based target. We were going to get recognized at the UN Climate Summit, and thinking, we need to do more, right? So if we're in big trouble, if having a science-based target is the ceiling and not the floor. Every company should be setting a science-based target if we're going to get there. And so at that climate summit in New York City, we announced a new goal, which was to, say we're still going to focus on our own footprint. That's table stakes. But our biggest influence as a tech company, we don't have a physical supply chain really. So our biggest influence is outside the 4 walls of our company. So outside of our scope 1, 2, and 3. And so we committed to saying, we're going to take our footprint from the prior year, and we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the broader world. So completely outside of our scope 1, 2, and 3, 50 times greater than our own footprint by 2030. So, that gets to helping our employees in their personal lives, our customers, the communities where we have a presence, and through partners. And really the hope is, it's hugely aspirational, but that it would inspire other companies to say, we're all in this together. We need to collaborate. What else can we do together? Because we're better together. Intuit, we're not that big. We can't do it alone. So collaborations with Drawdown and the companies represented here is really where we feel like we can make the biggest difference.
Great, thank you, Sean. And I'd love to turn it over to Elouise for just for a few comments from the perspective of a young person, kind of speaking to future generations and what excites you, what might we not yet be thinking about? What reflections do you have on all of this?
Yes, so well, we've known about climate change long before I was born, and it feels like it's only in the past few recent years that there's a sort of a global recognition that this is actually a serious problem, and there's sort of an acceptance of the scale of the crisis and therefore the scale our solutions need to take in order to combat them. And what excites me particularly about the private sector is the speed in which it can act to things, the urgency which it can sort of take on board if it wants to, and it can innovate and scale up much more quickly than policy sometimes does, which can take a long time to go through all the motions and can be much slower. And what's exciting me, particularly what you guys have just been saying, is that you've recognized that you can't do it alone. You need to use your greater influences. It's not just about the emissions inside your own company. It's also about how you can influence your customers, millions of them, the influence you have with policymakers due to the sway that you have within society. And I really hope that all of you will utilize that reach as far as you can. As the climate activist who is 23, my circle is small. However, all of yours is so much bigger, and you can reach more people and bring them on board. And I spend most of my time, I think, combating indifference from people, whilst you, with the influence that you have, can bring those people who may be indifferent and not really recognize that this is a problem that they have to face on board in this journey with you. And I think the most important thing to recognize in the climate movement is that carbon emissions is a starting point, but there's so many climate injustices linked to carbon emissions. And so often it's those who produce the least amount of carbon who are going to feel the greatest effects of the carbon that is released and all the sort of related issues. And that's something that really concerns me when we're talking about solutions and minimizing carbon, is losing sight of who are the people who are directly being affected about whether we succeed or not, and to kind of make sure we bring those more marginalized voices into the movement, because they're the ones who will feel the impact. It's unlikely any of us in the room are going to feel those impacts too close too soon, or we'll be able to mitigate them ourselves. But for so many people, we're not. And Jamie introduced at the beginning that I'm meant to be the voice of future generations, but it isn't the future that we're worried about. It's happening now. We're seeing the impacts now. And I think all your ambitions and all of your goals need to reflect that amount of urgency. We're not talking about future people anymore. It's happening to the youth today. And we don't want a lot. We just would like a safe world to grow up and to grow old in. And past generations had that luxury, and we're concerned whether or not we will get that too.
Thank you so much, Elouise. I'd love to open it up to anyone, any other panelists who would love to respond or comment on what Elouise said, or anything else that's been said so far.
I might jump in. What Sean and Elouise just said, it really resonated with me in terms of even if Google cleans up its operations, runs 100% on renewable energy, we're carbon neutral, etc., we're a very small piece of the economy. And I think where the real power of the private sector is how do we bring everyone together and how we enable others. And that has been really core to the development of our 2030 carbon strategy, where, of course, on our operational commitments, we really want to decarbonize electric grids because we believe that we have a lot to do in that area. And that's why we're moving to 24/7 carbon-free energy, moving past the 100% energy goal and really driving system-level change decarbonization in electric grids, which represent 25% of global emissions. However, as I said, the piece that excites me most is how do we use our own technology to enable others? And we're already seeing many, many people our users coming to Google for answers like, how do I compost? How do I recycle? Is this recyclable? And we've seen a really big uptake of searches around sustainability. And so we have now made this very explicit commitment to bring sustainability into our core products to offer those solutions. And we already have examples, for instance, Google Maps. It provides more than 1 billion kilometers of alternative low carbon transit options every day. The Nest Learning thermostat is also enabling the Nest users to reduce the energy that they consume at their homes between 10 to 15%. So those are examples of ways that we can use our own technology to go way beyond our four walls and enable everyone. And so I think that it is very important for the private sector to think beyond those four walls, and it's like, what is unique to your company that you can speak to what Sean and Elouise said about how do we bring everyone along, and what are those opportunities, those untapped opportunities that it goes beyond looking into your four walls.
Yeah, I think this is Scott. I agree with Anna. I mean, one of the questions that we ask ourselves is what's holding everyone else back, and what can we do as a company? Ourselves, we're doing a lot, as she mentioned, in our own four walls. How can we help influence others? I mean, our CEO sometimes has this phrase where he says one company can influence a sector. And so we spend a lot of time thinking, how do you influence a sector? Google influencing a sector, or Intuit, or Trane is different sectors, but influencing a sector is really important. It's right in line with how Drawdown sort of approaches the pathways as well. And I think that's where there's more work to do, Elouise. I think you made some great points, and I think that that's the next level of what the private sector should be focused on, is influencing our sectors, and then the sector is really, influencing on a much larger scale globally. And so we're focused on that. I mean, I think sometimes it is just this, it's not even misinformation, it's a lack of information out there around solutions that exist. We're selling, commercial grade water source heat pumps right now in big commercial buildings that used to burn fossil fuels to heat their buildings. We're replacing those with heat pumps that actually give away, that part of the solution is free cooling, and the heating is electrified on a green grid. What you get there is not only a 300% efficiency gain, but you've also displaced the use of fossil fuels to heat the building. So it's like a win, a win, a win. And these aren't things we have to wait on anymore. These things exist, they work, they're being put in place now. It's just like Anna's example. Sometimes it's just people don't have the information that's needed to make a better decision.
Great, thank you.
Well, I'll just add that I love what she said about the youth movement of wanting the future that we grew up with, and I agree 100%. And I think that the dialogue has changed when when I first started at Intuit in 2014. You talk to other companies, and they'll do a mapping of what's material to your company, and it's climate change material, and I don't even know how you can talk about that. How is not climate change material the future health of our planet not material to your company? So that shouldn't even be in the discussion. You just have to find what is your superpower as a company that you can enact change within your four walls and in your sector and in your community and the planet. So for us, as an example, we have millions of small business customers. That's half the global economy, and they're typically left out of the climate conversation. And so that's an area that we're really focusing on, and because it all matters. And so I love, and that's the beauty of, getting to work with the companies, on this panel within Drawdown Labs, is not just within our sector, but we're exploring ways to focus on cross sectors. Like, how can Intuit partner with a Trane or a Google or others, because we're better together. And so I love the excitement around, exciting new ways to collaborate that we didn't know existed before. And I think that's what we need.
Great, thank you all. And I'd love to pick up on one other thread from what Elouise said around climate justice, and kind of that the worst impacts right now are being felt by communities that have contributed the least to the problem. Any reflections on that from any of you around, or how you think about that within your companies or sectors, or anything there that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, I just say one thing, Jamie, about that is that climate justice and injustices are happening at various levels around the world, and also in various sectors or applications. An example is food loss, for instance. Food loss, food waste, huge contributor to climate change. As you well know, food loss is some say 10% of global climate impact. Is food loss, is food being wasted, overproduced, didn't make it to the consumer because maybe the whole system is not organized very well. Maybe we're overproducing because we're building in that waste stream, and maybe the consumers who need it most, not only do they not get the food, but to Elouise's point, there was climate impacts that were all negative in the chain leading to consumers. So one of the things we're working on with our Thermo King brand is how do we do our part to evolve the cold chain in areas where there is no cold chain that's mature currently, where some of the food loss certainly would happen. We're working, on either end of that, maybe at the consumer level, but also at the farm level. That's just one example. I think that's the type question we have to keep grappling with, because I think the injustices are happening sort of across the spectrum.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And from our perspective, we have our philanthropy arm, google.org, that has now done a lot of work around sustainability as well, and climate related philanthropy that is also trying to bring that lens of climate justice and making investment and grants and supporting those communities in different ways. On the other side, I think there's, again, the role of our technology. I think the superpower also applies to this. The superpower, like what is your superpower as a company, also applies to this topic. And one example is some projects that we're doing related to the Nest Learning Thermostat and how we're enabling energy security through Nest. Those are just a few examples of areas that we're working on. And I agree that we need to continue pushing boundaries, and we need to continue doing more.
Thank you. And from Project Drawdown's perspective, I mean, yeah, certainly all climate solutions are not created equal or, equally accessible. Many climate solutions have, already existed in order to address another issue, not necessarily the climate crisis. And so, solutions have co-benefits that can help with, address inequity, make us healthier, more resilient. And so, for the next phase, one of the next phases of our work at Project Drawdown will be to really focus around those key solution areas that have co-benefits. Great. So I just next wanted to go into, with our remaining time, we've talked a lot already about how each of the companies that you represent are looking beyond your operations, and that's really what Project Drawdown, I think we think is needed for the scale of the crisis. How are we not just looking at our own operations, but at helping the world achieve drawdown quickly, safely, and equitably? You've each kind of touched on that, but I'd love if there's anything else you wanted to share about about the idea of you leveraging the scale, scope, and resources of your company to help the world achieve drawdown. Any comments you'd like to share there in our remaining time?
I'll share one, Jamie, just because we work in commercial buildings and homes in most of our solutions, and of course Drawdown points out that building retrofits and the opportunities related to efficiencies and decarbonizing the built environment, they're huge. And they're sort of the quiet, this is a sleeping giant that more needs to be. Anna's point about Nest thermostats, just one example of how you do that. What we found, though, to the earlier points about working collaboratively, this is how we're seeing the bigger gains. It's not the old way of us thinking about how do we make our components more efficient. It may be about, of course, making sure our products are efficient, but also you layer on that data analytics and intelligence. And what you get there is it's a twofer that's actually exponentially greater in terms of efficiency, and it's what we call systems efficiency. And if you step back from the buildings and you keep stepping back, you can see opportunities for efficiency and thus decarbonization in very different pathways. And it's much better than the old 1+1+1, which was slow, required a lot of people in the room, and no longer. We can use intelligence and data analytics and layer things on, and the decarbonization potential is really great. And we're doing more of that work, but we're doing it collaboratively with either with customers or with providers, just like Intuit and Google and other companies. And I think that's the future. That's where we have to go. If we're going to get the scale that's needed between now 2030 and 2040, we've got to do this more collaboratively, more fast, and we have to step back and attack the problem at a more macro level.
Yeah, I completely agree, Sean. And I think that AI and machine learning provide very unique opportunities to move that to the pace that we really need. And talking about drawdown and syncs and collaboration, data, etc. One thing that we have been thinking a lot is how we enable syncs, and we have kicked off 2 different programs. One is a science-based reforestation program, and we're planting on degraded lands in California, Texas, Spain, Australia, and really looking to understand how the restoration of those degraded lands is really sinking carbon. But then on the collaboration piece, I am very excited to have been working with the Crowther Lab at ETH Zurich to help them develop a global restoration platform. And that is done in collaboration with a very wide network of environmental organizations and scientists. And that brings back to your comment about the need for data, for collaboration, for collective action. And I really like someone said to me recently, bring unlikely partners together. I think that's where a lot of the superpowers is, bringing those different players that you wonder, what are they doing together, collaborating? Well, there's superpowers that can be put together, and the end results scale to a level that we haven't seen before. So I'm excited about all of those opportunities.
Yeah, I would add to Anna's point of those interesting collaborations where you, on the surface, you look at it and think that doesn't really make sense. So, I mean, we're thinking about that with our 50X goal externally, trying to scale drawdown solutions that maybe aren't getting scaled fast enough versus other ones, maybe renewable energy, that obviously still need to scale, but they're moving along. So we're looking at different solutions, like to Scott's point around refrigerant management or reducing food waste. And I get asked all the time is, we're helping a small business scale in regards to the identification, collection, and destruction of refrigerants. And then I always get asked, well, what is refrigerant management? Why is that material to Intuit? That has nothing to do with your business model. But it's our planet, right? So it's material. And it was the #1 solution in 2017 in Drawdown, which when I read it, that blew my mind. That wasn't on my radar. So helping a small business scale that, if I can help them succeed as a small business, they have greater impact in the world, right? That's material, and that's important. Another great example of an interesting internal collaboration was our education team is trying to teach career readiness and financial literacy and design thinking to high school and college students, right, to be ready for the 21st century skills that they need to get good jobs. And so we've been partnering on having students learn those skills through real world projects around climate action. So they're learning those skills about what is important in the 21st century through the lens of climate action, which the youth really care about. It's just, I just think those kind of interesting collaborations is how you can really have a big difference really, really quick.
Excellent. Thank you all for sharing. It's really, inspiring and leading us toward the future we need. I wanted to give Elouise another opportunity to, to provide any reflection on what was shared before we bring this panel to a close.
Yes, thank you all. First, I'd say thank you for inviting me onto the panel and for the great contribution of all the other panel members. I particularly like Anna's point about the sort of combination of superpowers and how everyone has a skill to bring in this. It's a multifaceted problem. It's going to need a multifaceted answer, and everyone in all areas of life can contribute to the solution in some way, so long as we act with the urgency needed, but also with courage. I think Scott touched on this earlier. It can be scary being a pioneer in a company where you're the first one to say, actually, I think we need to do more, or even just facing your family and saying, maybe we should throw away less food. All those levels, you're trying to delve into an area which hasn't been charted before, and that's scary and it needs courage. And I think if your companies as well can encourage others to be courageous through demonstration of successes of your own, that will be incredibly influential, and I look forward to it. And I also hope you would consider trying to bring more young people into your discussions as well, considering we're such a great stakeholder in the future, because there isn't a more driven or enthusiastic task force out of necessity. And if we can combine that energy of the young people with the wisdom and experiences of those in positions like yourselves, a lot of these changes, I truly believe, can occur a lot quickly than they are currently right now, which is exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elouise. So I wanted to just close by saying, you know, Anna, Scott, and Sean, there's, you know, you all are, you know, are just pioneers on this, you know, in this journey where there's no precedent, there's no guidebook for how to do this. And so there, you know, you guys are just doing heroes work, and I'm really, you know, thrilled to be able to work with and learn from you all. And Elouise, thank you for, you know, for sharing that perspective. You know, you personally and the other young people, I think, give all of us courage to be more brave and more bold. So thank you for that. And thank you all for joining us today, and hope you continue to enjoy the rest of the conference.